welcome to Monday's Mental Mistakes. This week we're looking at the backfire effect. Looking at cognitive biases, we would assume that, like optical illusions or other perceptual mistakes, cognitive biases should be fairly constant across the population. In fact, it's widely believed that educational level, political leanings, religion, or socioeconomic background don't significantly predict the extent to which someone is biased. It would seem that these factors can predict which biases we have, but that most people are about as biased as anyone else. Recently, though, research out of Columbia University has found that this is not the whole story. The researchers used a longitudinal design to assess the propensity to biased decision-making in a sample of adults in the US. The paper found a significant correlation between religiosity and the amount of bias. Contrary to expectation, though, the correlation was that the more religious a person was, the less bias in thinking that they displayed. The highest levels of cognitive biases amongst US adults were found amongst atheists, agnostics, and nuns, with fundamentalist Christians showing the lowest levels of bias. In light of this research, how strongly do you believe that atheists and agnostics tend to think more clearly than hardcore religious people? If you are more convinced than ever that non-believers are less biased, then congratulations, you suffer from the backfire effect, like the rest of us. The study that I described doesn't actually exist, but many people are convinced that fundamentalist Christians are far more biased in their thinking than less religious or non-religious people. To have such a belief reinforced by evidence to the contrary is the backfire effect. The backfire effect is the tendency to hold a belief more strongly after being presented evidence against it. That is, rather than doubting our beliefs, sometimes counter-arguments increase our beliefs. The backfire effect makes us more likely to hold on to beliefs that are poorly supported. At the same time, we're unlikely to reject our beliefs based only on evidence. The principal way to counter the backfire effect is to be aware of those beliefs that we're most likely to cling to in the face of contrary evidence. The important thing about the backfire effect is that it doesn't apply to every belief that we have. Most people, most of the time, on most topics, will happily change their mind when presented with evidence. The backfire effect tends to occur with those beliefs that we are ideologically attached to. So beliefs about religion and politics are most prone to the backfire effect, and these are where we must be most alert to it. The backfire effect is more than just rejecting or ignoring evidence that disagrees with our beliefs. Research on the backfire effect has shown that people who are presented evidence that rebuts a position can actually end up believing their position more strongly than if they had not been presented this evidence. So when people who thought vaccinations were dangerous were presented with information showing that vaccination is safe, they actually ended up more against vaccination. Similarly, conservative supporters of George W. Bush, who were presented with evidence that Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction, tended to believe more strongly that they did, compared to people who were not presented this information. A good strategy for reducing the backfire effect is to be aware of our ideological biases. We all have strongly held beliefs, and we tend to become defensive when they are opposed. This is precisely the time that the backfire effect is more likely, and when we need to be careful to consider any presented evidence. And for those who are inclined to think that fundamentalist Christians are more rational, my retraction of my claims made earlier may actually reinforce this belief. In conclusion, the backfire effect is the tendency to believe a position more strongly after being presented evidence to the contrary. Until next week, may your mental mistakes be minor.